All right, on how language develops, infants use early vocalizations to practice making sounds, to communicate, and to attract attention. First thing they do is crying. They do this right from the get-go. The crying does have different types of signaling. Like there's actually a communicative feature of crying, and we'll get into that in a different chapter. It is a form of communication, though, is what I mean by this. Cooing is the next thing that happens. It first emerges at about 1 to 2 months. It's like this gurgling sound that infants will make, and it usually expresses pleasure. I'll post a video separate from this lecture that shows you what that sounds like if you're not familiar with it. And then babbling. That's the next stage in how language develops. Often in the middle of the first year, so ba, 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 ma, 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 that is babbling. Infants usually begin by using gestures at about 8 to 12 months of age. So they'll wave bye, they'll nod for yes, and they will start to point about 2 things. Pointing is considered an important social aspect of the language. It's probably related to theory of mind, it's related to perspective taking, the idea that your gaze isn't the same as their gaze. So they will maybe point at something and then they'll look at you to make sure that you're going to follow them to where they're pointing, because they understand you have a different perspective and they want to watch you follow that point. When kids are not pointing by this time, it could indicate that there's maybe some kind of a issue there. Before they start to learn words, infants can make fine distinction between the sounds of the language, the phonemes. So if you play a sound recording next to a kid and you're like ba, 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 and they'll listen to the ba, 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 and then they'll get bored of hearing that ba, ba, ba. If you change it to pa, 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 they'll turn their head again because they recognize, oh, that's a different sound. It has some novelty to it, so now I'm going to turn and listen to this sound. From about birth to 6 months of age, kids are considered, they call it, citizens of the world. They are able to recognize sound changes no matter which language the syllables come from. So you can play that. You could play the Chinese language to an American kid, and they're still going to be able to recognize those phonemes when they are 6 months and under. In about 6 months, we begin to lose this, and we can only hear all the phonemes in our own language. And so by about 6 months, the Chinese sounds, some of them are going to sound too similar, and they're not going to sound unique. They're not going to sound novel. As an example for me that I'm confronted with all the time, I'm still going to get it wrong even here trying to do it. There's 2 different French words. There's a doo-doo and a dodo. And one means it's a little doll that kids carry around, and one means to go to sleep. Doo-doo, dodo. I can't quite keep track of which is which, and I don't quite say them right. Sometimes I'll say it, they'll be like, no, that's not right. And I just can't quite capture it. And one of the reasons is why is kind of related to this, is that as you become older than 6 months, it becomes much harder to pick up on those phonemes. They do, though, become even better at perceiving sounds in their own language. And gradually, they'll lose the ability to recognize differences not found in their own language. Now, children also, they understand their first words earlier than they speak them. On average, they'll understand about 50 words at 13 months, but they can't say this many until about 18 months. So what this means is that their receptive vocabulary, the vocabulary that they understand, is larger than their spoken vocabulary. Infants' spoken vocabulary increases rapidly once their first words are spoken, though. There is a vocabulary spurt that occurs at about 18 months. So you can see this here. Their first words somewhere in this area, and then you'll have this vocabulary spurt somewhere in this area. Moving on to the next slide, there are cross-linguistic differences that occur in learning. So children that are learning Mandarin Chinese, Korean, Japanese, they acquire more verbs earlier in development than do children learning English, just because of the way that the language is structured. Both languages are structured. Also, children will often overextend or underextend the meanings of words. And so we talked about this in one of the earlier chapters, maybe last chapter, the idea of calling all men daddy. That's overextending that word to encompass all men. An underextension, this would be if a kid calls a boy if the boy's like 4 years old, but if the boy is 2 years old, or if the boy's 9 years old, and they don't call those boys because it's like it doesn't fit their schema for what those boy means, because in their mind boy just means a 4-year-old. It doesn't mean a 2 or a 9-year-old. This would be considered an underextension of using that word. So yes, the exact definitions for those: the overextension is the tendency to apply a word to objects that are inappropriate for that word's meaning, and then underextension involves applying a word too narrowly. Children will utter two-word messages around 18 months to 24 months of age. So like see doggy, more milk. They rely on gesture, tone, and context to convey meanings. And then they have what they call telegraphic speech. This is the use of short, precise words without grammatical markers. So there's no articles, auxiliary verbs, or any other type of things like connect sentences together. It's not just limited to two-word phrases, so they can be a little bit longer. But again, they are lacking some of those connective words. Mommy gives ice cream. That's an example of a telegraphic speech. And so on figure 4, we have some language milestones in infancy. If you would like to read through those, a lot of things we just talked about. And so that's how language develops in infancy. On the next set of slides, we'll talk about how language develops in early childhood.